Hello again, and welcome to One Israel News. It's now 9 June. We're going to go over the latest events here that's happened over the last 2 or 3 days. So we're on the Prime Minister's website. He's not updating much. Last time he updated was about 3 days ago. It's the same stories. He's congratulating the new president-elect, Isaac Herzog. Isaac. Good Lord. Isaac Herzog. It's very interesting. They're all smiles there because, 5 years ago, Bibi Netanyahu is running a really bitter campaign against Isaac Herzog, who had a sort of blue and white type party. I think it was called the New Zionist or something like that. Zionist Union, I believe is what it was called. It was basically Lapid and the Labor Party and Isaac getting together to try to, and they almost defeated Benjamin Netanyahu. Benjamin Netanyahu just ran a really nasty campaign, saying that the Arabs were going to join up with the Labor Party and destroy Israel and stuff like that. Let's see, and then same thing here. It's last time Netanyahu meeting with the foreign minister of Hungary. Let's see, we'll go on to the Facebook page. I believe it's just going to be more of the same stuff. Let's see. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Health Minister Yuli Edelstein attended an appreciation ceremony for the health system personnel and partner agencies for the contribution to the fight against coronavirus. Austrian Chancellor Sebastian Kurz and Pfizer Chairman and CEO Albert Bourla addressed the ceremony by video conference. Prime Minister Netanyahu. Israel's victory was achieved thanks to two basic elements: the millions of vaccines that we brought to the country and their rapid distribution to the citizens of Israel. This morning we also began vaccinating young people aged 12 to 16. This is huge news, and it promises us herd immunity. Now, I don't really care for Benjamin Netanyahu as prime minister, but he did a great job with this. Israel's leading the world in their vaccination program. Almost 90+% of the country has been vaccinated, and that includes Arab Israelis also, just to let you know. And so life is back to normal in Israel. They've got the coffee shops open, the restaurants open, the theaters open. You can go around with no mask, although some people are still wearing masks. And it's a great thing. I mean, it's really been a very good program. You notice the difference that even though Bibi Netanyahu has a big ego, the difference between his rhetoric and something that, a crazy person like Trump would say. Trump would have been like, it's all me. This vaccination program happened because of me, and then the vaccinations were all done because of me, and we're having great success because of me. We've been all like that. But, at least Benjamin Netanyahu knows that he's part of a team. He may be the leader, but he's still part of a team, and it's not all just him. So there you go. And I will say one thing about the vaccinated young people 12 to 16. Now, a lot of people are like, well, the percentage of young people dying is very, very small. But the thing they don't think about is that this virus is and will continue to moderate for the next of our lifetime, basically 10, 15, 20 years. Okay, so these children will be adults someday. And then if they've already got the vaccination, boom, there you go. It's like crazy. It's like vaccinating everyone for polio and then not vaccinating children until they get polio. It's kind of stupid. That the purpose of a vaccination is to set up your body's defenses so that it can handle a new type of disease or virus or something that comes along. So that's the whole purpose. That's why I rarely ever get sick, because I was vaccinated like 2 or 3 times, because this is back in the 70s. My parents kept losing the records because they were divorced, and I go live with one and go live with the other, and so I couldn't start school until we had the vaccination records, and my dad lost the vaccination records, so I had to get all the new vaccination records so I could go back to the new school while I'm living with my mom. And then when I went in the Army, I got everything again, plus a lot of other stuff for like biowarfare. So my body, I was, and then when I went to my unit, which was supposed to go to the Middle East, I got vaccinated for all kinds of stuff that they could think of was possibly happen over there. So I just rarely ever get sick. I mean, especially for my age, being 55, I I hardly go to a doctor. I mean, I can just say that. Now, I also, I don't smoke, I don't drink, and used to run quite a bit, marathons and stuff, so I'm in pretty good shape there. But still, even I'd say it's probably the vaccinations that have really, and all these inoculations that I've gotten, that have really helped me, boost my immune system. I never get the flu, I never get sick, I rarely get a fever. Just maybe I get sinus problems, that's about it. But there's not much of that a vaccination can do for sinus problems. So my whole point is vaccinations work. If you, inject them when they're young, as the body develops, it develops immunity as you get older. Okay, that's just the way the human body works. So if you expose children to a portion of a virus or a portion of a disease through vaccination, that's all vaccination is just giving them a little sample. It gives your immune system time to build up a defense to it, and you're boosting your immune system. Now, all these crazy people in the Trumpers in America that run around saying they don't want to be vaccinated, it's going to cause, autism and all kinds of other diseases. That's bullshit. Now, there are, preservatives and chemicals and things in vaccinations that do cause allergic reactions. That's just part of how it goes. Not everything is 100%. Like a seatbelt. A seatbelt's not going to save you in every single car accident, but the majority of car accidents is going to, save your life. Plus, an airbag also is going to save your life. So let's just get away from this. There was like one case of one little kid that got the vaccination and he died of a brain aneurysm or got autism or some crap like that, or maybe even 10 kids or 100 kids. But when we're talking on the large scale of 7 billion people, vaccinations work. Vaccinations are safe. It's just stupidity that people, it's just the craziness. I think it goes back to the thing that if you don't want to do something, or if you believe something, you can always find something to justify your reasoning. Anyway, enough lecturing about that. Anyway, if you haven't been vaccinated, get vaccinated. It works, okay? All right, let's see. And it's also, they're finding out, because coronavirus is part of the SARS type of, viruses, that the next evolution, next moderation, because these viruses are constantly changing. And here's the thing, this is how the viruses change. They find live bodies that aren't vaccinated. They mesh with their DNA. They take portions of that person's DNA and add it to their DNA, and then boom, you got a new moderation on that virus. And if you moderate, you have enough live bodies for that virus to live, because that's the only way the virus can live and replicate is through live bodies that aren't vaccinated, that won't kill it. It's like a petri dish. It needs that live body, and then it meshes with your DNA and your RNA, and then it replicates, and that's how it becomes a new virus, a new moderation of that particular virus. So what I'm trying to say is that if you're vaccinated for this virus, you're probably going to be ready. Your body is probably going to be able to handle, or the majority of people's bodies are going to be able to handle, the next SARS-CoV moderation type virus that's like coronavirus or COVID. Okay? All right, enough of that. So let's see. His, what is this? The Twitter account for the Prime Minister. Basically the same thing. He's meeting with the new Mossad director, David Barnett. It used to be that the Mossad director was secret. So I don't know why they have the Mossad director open now. It should still be secret, because that could put him and his family, under pressure and in danger there. Okay, so we're going on to the Foreign Ministry. Israel's elected to serve on the UN Economic and Social Council. That's maybe a good thing, I guess. President Rivlin congratulates President-elect Isaac Herzog. Same thing as last time. crews there. Let's see. Okay. We're going to the Foreign Ministry's Facebook page. Let's see. This guy is... Okay. For Israelis in southern Israel living under rocket fire from Gaza, bomb shelters are a lifeline. This guy is transforming dozens of bomb shelters across southern Israel into works of art. Very cool. Very nice. If you've been around Israel long enough and walk around enough, you're going to see in every park and in every building, new building, every mall, every residential new building, there's a bomb shelter. It's just a fact of life living in Israel. Every school's got bomb shelters. So you can go to a park, they'll have the slide for the kids, the swing for the kids, and there's a bomb shelter over in the corner. It's just a fact of life wherever you go in Israel. That's what's going to happen there. I lived kind of off and on a moshav out in the Beersheva when I was dating this girl, and they literally it seemed like every 50 meters there was a bomb shelter. They spent the last 70 years building bomb shelters, and that's all they did, because it's not just the threat from Gaza, from Hamas. There's also the threat of missiles from Hezbollah, which could launch them any day at any time at will. Okay. There's also used to be the threat of missiles from Syria, and now there's definitely the threat of missiles coming from Iran. Okay. Iran is, developing their nuclear program, so any missile they send could have chemical weapons, could have nuclear weapons. So, it's a large threat there. And then, up to recently, no one knew this, but even the threat of missiles and bombing from Russia, because when last time Netanyahu met with Putin warned him that if he continued, Israel continues bombing campaign in Syria, that at one time Russia had considered retaliating for Syria by bombing Israel, which totally blows my mind that Russia would even threaten something like that, because of course that would bring in the United States into the war and into conflict with Russia. Let's see, we got Mazel Tov to our favorite rhino, Rihanna, who welcomed her third child at the Ramat Gan Safari on Sunday. Both Rihanna and Ruvi, president, are doing well. So if you've ever been to Ramat Gan, they got a really cool drive around zoo there. So basically, you drive your car into this fenced-off area, caged-off area, and you're basically driving around your car. You're the zoo. You're in the zoo because the animals get to wander around freely, and then you just drive your car and get to see the animals. It's pretty cool, actually. Let's see. Here's more World Ocean Day. If you ever get a chance to go to Eilat, they got a really good aquarium there, really beautiful, really nice. Of course, the beaches in Tel Aviv and Netanya are really nice too. Let's see what else we got here. There was one more thing. Okay, number of Christians in Gaza before Hamas took over, 4,200. After Hamas took over, 1,000. Number of annual Christians in Israel. See, number of Christians in Israel, 180,000. Annual growth rate, 1.6. So the thing that's interesting about the Christians in Gaza is they're basically left over from the Crusades, from the Crusader times, from that Crusader population. There's always been a certain percentage, maybe like 1 to 5% of the Palestinian population that's been Christian. Okay, just a little side note on this: when I was in Opan in Israel, which is basically where you take classes to study Hebrew, there was this guy, an American, and he wasn't Jewish; he was Baptist. Okay, and this is probably the bravest man I've ever met. Okay, so the Baptist Church, or a conglomeration of Christian churches, puts together packages and aid for Christians living in Gaza. And so this guy would have to go down to Gaza, and he lived in Israel, and he would go down to Gaza like once a week. He would bring these packages of aid and Bibles and whatever was sent, blankets, whatever, to the Christians in Gaza, and he'd have to wear a bulletproof vest and a helmet. And then they'd actually have to hire and pay soldiers in Hamas to carry, to guide him around and protect him, because there was always other militants that would want to kill Christians, especially someone aiding Christians like that. Now, he wasn't a missionary. They weren't going out and trying to convert Muslims. They were just assisting the Christians that were there. So I always thought this guy, you put your life in hands every time you go down to Gaza once a week. Did it voluntarily, and just to help these other fellow Christians there. I was just really looked up to that guy, really amazed. Let's see here. Oh, also another thing about the Christians in Israel. Another thing I have to praise Bibi Netanyahu for is that he's really gone out of his way to try to recruit Arab Christians in Israel into the Israeli army, against a lot of opposition. There's a certain priest, he may even be in this photo here, I'm not sure. I think it's the guy in the center with the black beard. That guy is like good friends with Bibi Netanyahu, and I believe he's like Orthodox or something. But there's not a lot of Arabs, Christians that are joining the Israeli army, but out of 180,000 population, every year you got 5 to 10,000 people that are turning 18. Okay, maybe less than that, maybe 3,000. So out of those, maybe only 100, 200, 300, say 10% of those are joining the Israeli army. I just find it fascinating that Bibi's been able to convert those people to get them into the to be on the side of Israel. I just find it fascinating. One other thing is there's even Arabs that Arab Muslims have been joining the army. You can join. You're not drafted if you're Christian. If you're, what do you call it? If you're Arab, Palestinian, Muslims, Christians in Israel aren't drafted, but you can volunteer. So there's even been some Arabs that have volunteered, and I've seen like these ceremonies. It's just crazy. They got an Israeli flag in one hand, they got a Quran in the other, and they give them a machine gun in the middle, and they're swearing their allegiance to Israel, and they're really excited. And I'm like, whoa, this is can't we just have these guys go pick up trash and plant trees? But they're giving them guns and they're putting them in the Israeli army. But I'm not so sure about that. But okay, so moving on. I've been talking too much. Let's see. So this is the Foreign Ministry's Facebook page. Basically kind of the same thing. Ambassador Gilad Erdan. Yesterday I visited the AP headquarters in New York to explain to top executives that the building housing the Gaza operation was being used by Hamas terrorists trying to jam the Iron Dome. This is why it was prioritized for IDF during last month's operation. Very good. Yeah, you need to get, especially the AP, because a lot of people don't know this, but if you're, say, some newspaper in Seattle, or you're some newspaper in Chicago, you don't have your own correspondents in Israel. Now, maybe the New York Times does, maybe the LA Times does, maybe the Washington Post, but most newspapers, news organizations in the United States don't have their own correspondents all around the world. So they rely on a network of correspondents through the AP, the UPI, and then those people put out stories, and then these other news organizations buy those stories that they like from those organizations, and that's how they make their money there. And so AP is very critical because that's where a majority of the news organizations in the United States buy their foreign content, you know. So that's very important to get that straight. Let's see here. Diplomatic meeting between PM Florenciu of Romania. I thanked him for the warm relations between our countries and the country's fight against anti-Semitism. We must continue to combat anti-Semitism without compromise. Of course, that's the previous Ruvi Rivlin. I think that's the previous president, right? Anyway, Ambassador Leo Vanoveski. Cheers, Vince, and West African in memory of the Ambassador Corte. And it's interesting to note that the current government that's in charge now, the Likud, they were a terrorist organization called Irgun, and the Irgun didn't want the what do you call it? They didn't want there were peace negotiations going on between Jordan and Israel, and so there was a Swedish ambassador named Bernadotte, and he had negotiated between the Jordanian army and the Israeli army of where this little truce demilitarized zone would be. Okay, and of course, being Irgun and being totally irresponsible children, they didn't have to do the hard negotiations because that was up to, the responsible people like Prime Minister Ben Gurion and the Labor Party. So they're just bomb throwers. When you're bomb throwers, it's easy. You don't have to take responsibility for anything, which is what Benjamin Netanyahu does, and Likud, they're carrying on that tradition. So right near Azza Street, where the Prime Minister's residence is now, it wasn't back then, but now, Bernadotte was traveling back and forth between the Jordanian Old City, or the Jordanian-controlled Old City, and the Israeli, government. And so the Irgun, they blocked off the street, blocked in Bernadotte's, limousine, and just walked up to his window and assassinated him and killed him. And now this is the negotiator. He's not, pro-Palestinian. He's not pro-Israeli. He's, negotiating to stop the war. Okay? And so they murdered him. And also interesting to note that Bernadotte was one of the, because he was an ambassador from Sweden during World War, and he was a Swedish citizen during World War II, negotiated with Heinrich Himmler. Heinrich Himmler's, I think it was Heinrich Himmler, yeah, was negotiating behind Hitler's back to end the war, and as a peace gesture, he released thousands, maybe 100,000 Jews from the death camps. And Bernadotte was the one that he was negotiating with and sent in these Swedish ambulances and buses to get these people out of the death camps. We're talking like March, April 1945, right before the war ended. And there's even these, if you go up to Mount Herzl and the Holocaust Museum at the back there's one of these ambulances that Bernadotte had. But to show their appreciation for saving over 100,000 Jews, the Irgun, which is the Likud party nowadays, murdered him right there off of Azza and King George Street. So it just shows you what kind of people you're dealing with. This is the same, descendants of that same mentality, these same people. No negotiation, hold out for everything. Anyone who's not for everything they believe is the enemy of Israel. So this is what we're going to see with this new government coming up. You're going to see assassination attempts. You're going to see people vilifying them, saying that they're Lapid and Bennett and Gantz are traitors to Israel, and they're selling out Israel. And this is why you're going to see this government's going to fall apart really quickly, because the pressure is going to be on Bennett. He's going to be prime minister, And his settler movement people are just not going to stand for any negotiations with the Arabs on anything. Okay, so this is why this government's not going to last very long. End of the year, that's as far as I give it, would be the end of the year. Anyway, I'm just rambling on too much here. So Foreign Ministry, there's the police department. Let's see. We got, what is this there? It's their Facebook page for the police department. Let's see if anything interesting's happening with the Israeli police. I always love the Israeli police. They do a fantastic job. Let's see, there's a pinned story 15 minutes ago. Let's see. The determined struggle in the use of possession of weapons continues in Arab society. During the last week, police officers in the Northern District seized various combat measures in Safaram, Iskal, Tehran, and with M16 rifles, guns, stock, grenades, da-da-da-da. See, this is the problem I see with having Israeli Arabs in the military. They're going to steal weapons. And then you've got, a certain element of the Israeli army, that even Jews, that are willing to look the other way and make a buck by selling guns to Arabs for price. I guess the money is more important than actually protecting your own Jews. But in Israel, despite the popular myth among the Republicans, you can't own a gun. It's almost impossible to own a gun legally in Israel unless you're a policeman or military officer or a diamond executive or in security. It's just nearly impossible to own a gun. There's no Second Amendment rights or anything like that in Israel, which I think is a big mistake. I think everyone in Israel is not a security risk, not a criminal, not mentally ill, that's gone through a thorough background check and training, and it should be allowed to at least own one handgun. And if you're a hunter, maybe one rifle or shotgun, not assault rifles, we're not talking M16s here, but at least a handgun, okay? Because there's been many times I've been in Israel, I could have used a gun, I didn't have it, okay? I've been in many situations where my only alternative was to flee. That was it, I was involved in that incident that happened on King David Street right there back in 2008. I was walking up that street, and then this Arab was bashing that bulldozer into the bus. If I'd had a gun, I could have killed him right there. But luckily, the special forces in Israel, they were there in 30 seconds, and they executed him. But I walked right up on that, and then there was like this cab driver got out with a little pea shooter 22. It just bounced off the metal. But if I'd had like a handgun, I could have killed the guy. But it didn't happen. And anyway, let's see. I'll keep moving on here. Enforcement against life-threatening offenses in North Traffic Division. Officers went out this week for a wide enforcement operation at intercity roads. Police officers committed to enforcement against distraction offenses, using a phone while driving, speeding offenses, and heavy vehicle. You could literally pay down the debt or pay for the entire military if you just find everyone in Israel that was handling their cell phone, talking on their cell phone while they're driving. Of course, you'd have to have, 10,000 officers for the traffic patrol, because you could literally go out all day, every day, 24 hours a day, and stop Israelis who are distracted driving, using their cell phones while they're speeding. It's just, unbelievable how many people use their cell phones while they're driving in Israel. Let's see, in Jerusalem government, every security operations complex, district commander. So this is about, they had to cancel that parade, which I think was a good idea. There's no point agitating the Arabs. That Flag Day parade running through the old quarter. This, I think, here is a story about pride in Israel or Jerusalem. So it's funny, I worked with this moving company in Jerusalem. The lady who ran the business and owned it, I guess she owned part of it, was a former officer on a Israeli ship or something like that, but she was homosexual. She made no bones about it. Very, very small, tiny little office. And there was another guy in there, was one of our best salesmen. He was a gay guy, not even Jewish, but from a gay American. He was living there in Israel. I don't know how he was able to do that. And then there were, a couple. This woman only seemed to hire lesbians for her manager. So every manager that was working that wasn't, when she wasn't there, was there, and they were all lesbians. And then, I'm sitting there on the phone trying to do sales, and the gay guy and the lesbian would be arguing about what was better, being gay or being a lesbian, and it just it got too much, especially in such a small, tiny office, so being so unprofessional. Not that I'm against gays or not I'm against lesbians. That's all good and fine, but when you're working, I'm not going to sit there and talk about, how many girlfriends I've been with and slept with and all this kind of stuff in an open office. It's just nobody's business, and nobody wants to hear that. So the same thing. And I tried to explain to them that, look, nobody wants to hear this. Oh, you're anti-gay, you're anti-lesbian. No, I'm not. It's just this is a professional office, and, da-da-da-da-da, and let's just stick to doing our business and then go home. And then if you want to talk about it outside work on the break, no problem. I don't care. But they never could seem to get that. So I ended up quitting because I just couldn't take it. And then what really happened, then this lady, they hired an Arab Israeli, a Palestinian who is a lesbian also. And then they're all sitting there talking, and then not only they're arguing about, what's better, being gay or lesbian, but then they started arguing about the Arab-Israeli conflict too. And here I am trying to make sales and do my work, and I was doing pretty good, but man, it's just the distractions just got way too much in this tiny little office. So eventually, I asked them if I could work at home. I could do the same thing at home. They didn't want me to do that at home, so I finally just quit and found another moving job. But it was just, it was too much. Look, I don't go around boasting about how many girls I've slept with or how many girlfriends I've had in an office. That's not appropriate, or what I'm doing in my personal life that's not appropriate for work. Nobody should be doing that. I don't care if you're gay, straight, whatever. It don't matter. But, to sit there, literally hour-long conversations while I'm talking to customers on the phone and they're arguing about, these kind of craziness. But, they were young. They were like 20, 21, 22 years old. So what do you expect? Anyways, enough of that. We're going to move on. Ooh, I'm way behind here. Let's see. Let's see if we can catch up here. I'm just going to go straight to the news. Yeah, straight to the news sites here. And it'll spin up. So this is Arutz Sheva. Of course, I really like this website. I don't like their slant, their right-wing settler slant, but I like the way they set up their news stories and stuff. So, all right, so that's an advertisement there. So, Akko cannot fall. Support the Jewish community in Akko. Well, that is one thing. There is a very large population of Arabs in the old city of Akko there. Of course, that goes back to the Crusader days. The lie that eternally bugs Israel. Let's see, how old is this story? Yeah, June 2nd. Wow, they haven't updated their website in quite a while. Interesting. Yeah, because I was about to say that's the same story. Wait a minute, hold on one second. Let me see here. Okay, yeah, there we go. Rightist MKs up in arms as Knesset pays way for a unity government vote. So this is what's going to happen. I can tell you right now. Bennett's going to be prime minister, but probably half of his Yamina party is going to bolt. And they're going to bolt over to the Likud, okay? But in Likud, you've got, Edelstein is trying to take over Likud. So probably a third of those people are going to bolt and come over to the government, okay? So Bennett basically you're going to find himself as being prime minister without a party, because a lot of his party are going to bolt back to the right, okay? And then you've always got this wild card of Masoud, or whatever his name is, Abbas, the Islamist party with his 4 seats, is always going to be the kingmaker. So, if Bennett wants to stay prime minister, he's going to have to please Abbas. That means no going after Gaza. Israel starts bombing, or Hamas starts coming after with us with rockets, and Israel retaliates, that's going to be the end of this government. It's going to be very, very simple. There's a lot of mines that Bennett's going to have to negotiate around. Okay, but what could happen, although we probably have to have new election, you'd have a third of the Likud jump over with Edelstein to Lapid and Gantz if a new elections came about, and they could form a government that way, and then Bennett would go back to the right. But I don't know what's going to happen. We'll see, but I don't see how this could last all the way to the end of the year. Okay, let's see here. Debka file. Let's see what's happening here. Prickly flag parade decision shunted over to next government. First test of emerging Israeli government Iran is galloping towards breakout. Let's see. Unexplained death of intelligence officer linked to damaging security offenses. So this guy died in prison. They can't name him because he violated some kind of security whatever, and now the family is trying to clear his name. Egypt infuriates Israel, lets Hamas rearm with fresh round of rocket aggression. Gantz opts to line up with the U.S. and Iran. Where does designated Premier Bennett stand? See, Gantz really blew it, last year. Yeah, I believe it was last year after that election. He could have been prime minister, but what did he do? He decided he could have been a prime minister. It would have been a coalition government with Netanyahu. But what did he decided to do? He decided to become the Knesset speaker or whatever, and bolted, and then his whole blue and white coalition party fell apart. Not very smart. Let's see, what else we have here? Let's see, this is Globes, which is like the Wall Street Journal of Israel. Dun, dun, dun. It's always amazing, all these companies in Israel, they're always like raising money. They don't really do anything, haven't really done anything, haven't produced anything. And then they'll raise all this money on their stock value, and then boom, they'll sell it to their idea with nothing to prove it, nothing to show for it, to some Wall Street company, and they'll be rich, get $100 million, whatever, for doing just nothing, like inventing an idea. They didn't produce anything, they haven't made anything, they haven't invented anything. They just come across with an idea. It's just very, very pathetic and lazy, I would say, See, there you go. Ronnie Zim, Israel's newest tycoon. This is why you can't afford the rent in Israel, because all these people are getting millions of dollars infused from Wall Street, and it's driving up the real estate market, and that way the average working person in Israel can't keep up. It's just impossible. Let's see. This is Haaretz. Let's see what the news is here. In just 1 month, illegal settler outpost sprouts up on Palestinian lands. Yeah, they're going to have to... You're not going to see any kind of adjustment of that with Bennett in power if he wants to stay in power. Let's see. It's kind of the same thing. Knesset panel confirmed swearing in of Bennett Lapid government Sunday afternoon. That's this Sunday afternoon? This Sunday, I believe. Let's see. All right. Going to the next one here. This is Hamoudi. This is the religious Haredi news organization here. Let's see what they've got. Satellite images show unusual activity at nuclear site near Tehran. Knesset committee confirms new government to be formed Sunday. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Netanyahu between now and Sunday. Gun ownership and mental stability. Early last Wednesday morning, a man arrived in San Jose, California, light rail facility. Oh, this is an old story. Wow. All right. Let's see what we got here. What else? Israel Hayom. What else? I think this is about the same news here. Yeah, it looks like about the same news. Two former Israeli ambassadors to South Africa call Israel apartheid state. Former Israeli ambassadors to South Africa. Now, let's look at that story. I seriously disagree with that because Israel's not an apartheid state like, South Africa was. You don't have a group of people in Israel that are ruling over the others and able to vote, and the other ones aren't able to vote, and they're creating Bantustans. What you have is two separate nations, okay, of groups of people that have completely different culture, completely different religion, and they need to separate. Nothing wrong with that. You don't have, you don't want to force people that hate each other to live together. It's just, it won't work, okay? Let's see. And the facts are that if the Palestinians would just concentrate on developing their state and educating their people and stop attacking Israel, Israel would never, ever attack the Palestinians. It's just really that simple. Because you look at any time Israel uses force, it's in response to an unprovoked attack by the Palestinians, Hamas, some terrorist incident, something like that. So if the Palestinians would stop attacking Israel, they would have had their state 20, 30 years ago. But see, it benefits the Palestinian terrorists. It benefits people on the right in Israel like, Netanyahu, because as long as you can keep that tension, there's always going to be a need for, because like I said, I was saying about the riots that were going on last summer in the U.S., the little old lady in the suburbs, she may sympathize with the Black Lives Matter, and she may sympathize, and be as left-wing as possible, but when the rioters come to her neighborhood and are burning down her neighbor's house and threatening to burn down her house, guess where she's going to run? She's going to run to the right, run to the police, run to the Republicans to save her ass, okay? That's just the reality. It's no different in Israel. It's exactly the same thing. And Bibi Netanyahu knows this, and he's been using that to stay in power by never eliminating the threat, by invading Gaza and wiping out Hamas. You always keep that cancer on you, and then you always need that doctor, okay? If the cancer's gone, you don't need to see the doctor, okay? It's a very, very simple formula. Keep the tension going, keep the fear going, because people, I don't care what their education, I don't care what their stated philosophy of life is, when the lion's coming to eat them and their children, they're going to run. That's just the facts of life. Fear is the biggest motivator of anything. They're not going to sit there and try to negotiate or philosophically, try to soothe the lion. They're going to run. That's just the reality, folks. Okay. Keep going here. What else do we have here? I-24 news. Israeli archaeologist discovers 1,000-year-old fully intact chicken egg. Wow. Well, that's exciting. Let's see. Okay. Fox News releases satellite images showing unusual activity at Iranian nuclear site. See, now you got to be careful with stories like this because Fox News has been known to be, when you have an intelligence service that wants to put a spin out there of something that's actually happening that may not be happening, they always run it to Fox News because they'll run anything, okay? So you always have to be careful of that, but I believe that's probably pretty accurate. Let's see, okay. So Jerusalem Post, IDF Chief Kohavi, be modest with how long Gaza deterrence will last. Be modest. Deterrence is an elusive concept subject to cruel judgment of time. Well, I think the best deterrence is killing them. That's the best deterrence. If you kill them, they're not a threat anymore. If you kill them, you capture them, you take the land away from them, they can't launch their missiles. That's the ultimate deterrence. If you're just sitting there pointing a gun at them and say, hey, if you do the wrong thing, we're going to shoot you, that's not as much as a deterrence. If you kill them or kill enough of them, the rest will hide, and that'll be a good deterrence. That's just my reality, the way I think about things. Because if people know they're going to die, if they do this or they do that, and you've ensured that's going to happen, they're more likely to stay in line. Because, again, it's the fear. People want to live, whether you're Jewish, Muslim, Israeli, Palestinian, American, Russian. People want to live, and they want their family to live. If you threaten that, and you back it up by actual doing something about it, then that causes that thinking in their head to think about what they're doing. And again, like I said in my earlier videos, Netanyahu has not established enough fear among the Hamas leadership. They're running around, going to rallies, holding up children with weapons as suicide bombers. They're not in fear. They're driving around in their Mercedes saying, F you. They're not in fear. Okay? I don't care how hardcore you are, how fanatical you are. You got a family, you got a wife, you got children, you got a home. You're going to have some fear one way or another. Okay? You're not immortal. Despite, the Avengers and Marvel, Superman heroes and stuff like that, nobody's immortal. So there's always going to be a fear factor. The last 12 years, Bibi Netanyahu has not put fear in the Hamas leadership or Islamic Jihad. He's only emboldened them. Because when you keep attacking people and you don't kill them off and you let them live, that just says, hey, I must be immortal. But he needs to show them they're not immortal. Okay? When they dropped a bomb on a house, on a apartment building, and killed 100 people to wipe out one Hamas leadership, that sent a message. You didn't see him do anything for a long time after that. When they sent a bomb and blew up Hamas's leader after he was exiting the mosque in his wheelchair, and you didn't see anything happen for a long time after that, that sent fear amongst them. Leadership in Hamas has no fear right now. They're laughing their asses off. They're holding rallies. 12 years of Bibi Netanyahu, they love it. They love him to stay in power because they never go after them. They have no fear. They're mocking us. Anyway, I doubt that Bennett or Lapid or Gantz could put any fear in them after 12 years of Bibi Netanyahu. It's going to take literally bombing their house, bombing their office, bombing their car, bombing their kids' school, bombing where they work, bombing their grocery store. You're going to have to make it so it's so dangerous that, all these people have wives, okay? And they have children. And if you put enough fear, the wife is going to be at his ear going, hey, don't go out today. Don't go drive around in your car today. Don't go to your office today. Okay? But there's none of that. None of that, because 12 years, they're immortal. You didn't get me for 12 years, so there. F you, Israel. All right, we're almost done here. Last one, YNet News, and we can wrap this up. I'm actually kind of early now. I should have gone back to the other websites there. Amid civil unrest, Israeli rescue services emerge as beacon of coexistence. Well, you know, I love the idea of coexistence. I really do. I think it's a nice thing to shoot for, but just going by human nature, and when the chips are down, what happens? We saw what happened in Lod. We saw what happened in Ramle. We saw what happened in the edges of there in Joppa. Okay? When the Israeli Arabs have their way, they attack Jews. They attack them in their cars. When they have no fear, they have no fear of punishment, they have no fear of retribution, they have no fear of being arrested or killed or going to jail, they attack Jews. Okay? You have to put the fear back into them so they police themselves. Okay? Coexistence, all that's great and wonderful, but when you have young 19, 20, 21-year-old Arab men that have no fear, they're going to attack Jews. They're going to attack your wife. They're going to attack your sister. They're going to attack your brother. They're going to stone your car. Believe me, I know about getting stoned in cars. It's happened to me once before because they have no fear. Okay? And I'll end with this story. One time, before I moved to Israel, I came on a trip. Right before I moved to Israel, actually. About 6 months before. And I brought a friend. He wasn't Jewish, wasn't Israeli, just a coworker. And we were driving around Jerusalem. And we went to the old city, hung out in the old city. He wanted to go to the Garden of Gethsemane because he's a Christian. So you drive over there. There's no signs, nothing. I missed the church. Went up in this area to the right, to the south of the Garden of Gethsemane, of Mount Scoffus, up near the Jewish cemetery there. Well, on the back side of the Jewish cemetery is a slum. Go up there to turn around. All these kids, 8, 9, 10-year-old kids on their bikes. You know, in Israel, the Israeli license plates are yellow. The Palestinian license plates are white. So these kids could see our Israeli license plates. They knew who we were. So they just laid their bikes down in the road in front of us. Okay? So I'm looking at the kids, honking my horn, telling them to get out of the way. The kid, my friend, had bought this big Star of David necklace, and he was wearing it, you know, just supporting Israel. The kid looked through the window.